Welcome to Mold Land. I'm glad you're back here. You know, there are quite a few choices on this shelf. Now we're going to pick something that's smaller, that's not too big. I think this mold right here will be great. It's going to challenge us a little bit because we're going to take a flat slab of clay and drape it over this plaster mold. Now, a couple of things you should know about plaster. Number one, it's very, very, very absorbent. So if I put clay on here within probably a class period, it is going to suck all the moisture out of that slab into the plaster. That's going to cause that clay to shrink and crack, and we want to remove that before that happens. So we have to be aware of it. There's not really a deadline or a timeline in which I can say, oh, take it off in half an hour. We need to keep an eye on it as it dries. Number two, plaster is very fragile. It doesn't bode well to just be tossed up here. It should be placed gently. Plaster can chip and it can break. And then molds get chipped right here on the edges, and then that mark is going to be transferred into your slab. So, let's go back to the work table. Let's get started. Now that we're back from our mold library, let's take a look at our tools before we get started. So, we have a rolling pin. We have our pottery knife. We have a roulette that we're going to use to texture our slab. We have a gift card just to compress that slab. We have a sock that's going to help us to snug the clay up against our plaster form. We have a couple rolls of tape that are going to elevate this. And we have this banding wheel, which is going to allow everything to spin so that I don't have to. So, the first thing that we need to do is to take this 3 to 4 pounds of clay and transform it into a slab. So let's do that. Boom! Done! Wasn't that fast? I love technology. So we're going to go ahead and take this roulette and we're just going to roll this across the slab. Now we could do 1, 2, 3 passes. We could do some other things. But I'm going to go ahead and just take this roulette and make one impression. So again, when I'm using a roulette, I want to make sure my hand is pushing down firmly all the way against that slab. When I am using these roulettes, remember that the plastic clay, as soon as it's soft enough to roll out and everything is done, put your impression into the clay right away. So I made one. I'm going to set that right here. And I'm just going to take my gift card and I'm going to add some decorative lines to break that up just a little bit. I'm going to turn this around. And I'm going to do this again on this side. If you'd like to use somebody else's roulette, please feel free to. So, now that I'm ready, my slab is decorated, I'm going to go ahead and show you how we're going to take this slab and transfer it to this plaster mold. Now, it's not extremely difficult, but it does take some patience. So we're going to walk through this step by step. So the first thing I want you to see is that there's nice texture on this side. This is the side that's going to go facing the plaster mold. One thing I forgot to mention is that I don't want this mold to sit flat on the banding wheel. Then that clay is going to go down and it's going to come off and I don't get a really nice sharp line. So I'm going to elevate that with a couple of rolls of tape, maybe a slip container, anything that's going to be substantial and is not going to make this wobble. So again, I'm going to grab my slab, I'm going to put it right on top, and I did all of the slab stuff that I talked about in that first video about making sure that I compressed it, and whatever I do to one side, I do to the other. So, if you notice, I have a lot of extra clay. I wanted to make sure I had a bigger slab than I would really need, but before I can really get this to snug up to the mold, I need to use my pottery knife. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hold this clay right down here and I'm going to push against it really lightly, and I can see that this line right here is the bottom of the mold. So I'm going to cut below that, and I say about 1/2 inch, but you can leave a little bit extra. And I'm going to remove that clay. And I'm going to do the same thing all the way around. Remember, I don't need to cut all the way through. I just need to score it, and it will tear. So I do a little bit here. I do a little bit here, feeling where that bottom part of the mold is. Scoring it again, removing it, and pretty soon I'm going to have exactly what I need. Now if you notice, I can push this together a lot easier. So I'm starting with the clay right here, and I'm going to push on the corners, or on the edges, and push that right down. And if I ever feel like if the clay is going to fold, I want to peel that back a little bit, and maybe I need to remove a little bit more material. So this is a slow process, but I want to make sure that that slab hugs this form completely. As you can see, I have 1, 2, 3 corners pretty well attached, and I'm just going to move on to my final one. So again, really gently pushing this down. I wouldn't have been able to do this unless I went ahead and cut off all that extra. Now, if my slab was really thin, it might tear right against the edge of the form. But this is where I want to be. So what I have here is basically my slab roughly formed across that plaster mold that I created. I have my extra clay, and this is going to go straight back into the puck machine. It's nice and soft. I can use it right away. But I'm not done quite yet. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use this weighted sock. And this weighted sock is filled with probably split peas. Anything dry that gives this a little bit of flexible pressure, I go all the way around, and I want to make sure that the slab really hugs that form. If it's loose, it will not make a good impression, and it will not get the lines that I need. So I work all the way down on the edges, up on the top, and I know some of you are probably thinking, oh, I just put that texture in and I'm going to ruin it all. Not the case. I'm not hammering this against there. I'm using it really gently. I do want this slab to curl under just a little bit, but eventually I'm going to have to pop this off, so I can't have it wrapped underneath. I just want it snug and I can pull it back. So this is what I have. Now I'm going to set this aside for probably 20 to 30 minutes, or in our case, we're going to make this at the beginning of the class, and right before we leave, we're going to pop it off, we're going to bag it up, we're going to save it till the next day. So let's take a little break, and we'll come back with our finished one. Now we're back. Now we've let this sit, and it's dry enough for us to pop it off the mold. So what we're going to do is we're going to take and peel the edges back just lightly enough, and it should pop kind of right off the mold. Now we may need to encourage it just by peeling back and pushing with the thumbs on top. That should come right off. And you can see that this form has left a really nice impression. So we're going to move this off to the side. And now I'm going to show you one of the last steps. We're going to go ahead and create a finished rim. The 3 simple steps that you're going to use first are using the pottery knife to remove the excess material, a sure form to grind down any of those edges that might be a little irregular, and then a profile tool. Now this is my disposable profile tool, and this is a commercial example. And what this is going to do is compress the slab and make a nice finished edge. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to cut this. Again, the same thing. As I cut, I do not need to be precise. I do not need to cut all the way through. And as I cut this, remember, I just need to score it enough and it will break on that line. Now there's a lot of flexibility in this, and I'll share a slideshow with you about some alterations, things that you can do to this to make it a little bit more interesting. But for our demonstration, we're just going to cut this flat against that line that already existed from the bottom of our form. So they're still pretty soft. If they are soft enough, they can go back into the pug machine. But otherwise, let's just go ahead and throw these in the back in the large dried out clay bin. So this is what I have after my first tool. Now the sure form we talked about when we were making coils is going to allow us to make very, very fine adjustments to make sure that this is nice and sharp, flat, even. Now it is a cheese grater like tool that only works in one direction. And if you look very closely, there are some teeth that are shiny, and that means that cutting will happen when I drag it across this surface. This way will do nothing. So I'm going to go ahead and use that Surform to make a nice flat top all the way around. So that's step 2. Step 3, we're going to wrap it up with our profile tool. Now there is a little bit of extra that's overhanging this right now, and I'm just going to peel that off. But we're going to take this profile tool, and there's lots of different profiles that are cut out. I'm going to select this one right up here, and that will fit right up against that edge and slowly compress it. So this not only compresses it, but it cleans it up and it removes that hard, sharp edge. Now, this is not necessary to do this all over the whole thing, but maybe I want to decide to slip and score something on here. But a finished edge is not something that I've just ran my Surform across. It has some final addition, and that's either done with an extra piece that's been attached, or we're using one of our profile tools to finish the job. So this wraps up our demonstration on how to use a slab, a plaster mold, and to construct this final Plasterform piece. Now there's going to be a few more things that we'll discuss in class, but this should give you enough information to get started. So, pottery fans, stay hungry.